Jimmy Hart has had his fair share of headline-worthy moments, from a messy lawsuit with WWF to his erratic behavior fueled by substance abuse. While he's a big name in WWE history, he's certainly faced his share of ups and downs along the way. But before we move on any further, make sure that you have already subscribed. Oh, and while you are at it, make sure to hit that like button. Over the years, there have been plenty of stories floating around about Jimmy Hart's behavior behind the scenes. Fellow wrestlers and people in the industry have shared anecdotes that paint a picture of him being a bit unpredictable at times. Some have even speculated that substance abuse might have played a role in some of his more erratic moments. According to these accounts, there were occasions when working with him wasn't exactly smooth sailing, with claims of unprofessional conduct popping up now and then. Back in the mid-1990s, Hart also found himself caught up in a legal battle with the WWF. The dispute centered around something that's pretty common in the entertainment world: money, specifically royalties. Hart claimed he wasn't getting his fair share from the sales of merchandise and videos that featured him. Considering how much wrestling fans loved his over-the-top personality and catchy music, it's no surprise he felt he deserved more credit for his contributions. The whole thing turned into a full-blown legal case, with both sides digging in their heels. For fans at the time, it added an extra layer of intrigue to the drama already happening in the ring. It's worth noting that these kinds of disputes weren't unusual during that era, as the wrestling industry was growing and the business side of things wasn't always as polished as it is today. Eventually, the lawsuit didn't go all the way to a dramatic courtroom showdown. Instead, the two sides reached a settlement out of court. The exact terms were never made public, leaving fans to speculate about how much Hart walked away with. One of the more infamous events in wrestling history, the plane ride from hell, took place in 2002, and Hart happened to be on that chaotic flight. For those unfamiliar, this wasn't just any flight. It was a chartered plane carrying WWE wrestlers and staff back from a European tour. What started as a routine trip quickly spiraled into a night of drunken antics, unruly behavior, and downright chaos at 30,000 feet. Stories from that flight have become the stuff of wrestling legend. Some of the most well-known names in the industry were involved in outrageous incidents that range from harmless pranks to seriously problematic behavior. Thankfully for Jimmy Hart, his name wasn't tied to any of the major scandals that came out of that flight, but just being present on that notorious trip has made him part of the lore. Years later, when the plane ride from hell was covered in the hit docuseries Dark Side of the Ring, Hart declined to participate in the episode. This decision immediately sparked curiosity and speculation. Fans and insiders couldn't help but wonder if Hart's refusal meant he might have witnessed something significant, or perhaps even been involved in ways that were never made public. Was it a case of wanting to avoid reopening old wounds? Or was there something more to the story that he preferred to keep under wraps? While we may never know Hart's full perspective on what went down during that infamous flight, his decision to stay silent has added another layer of intrigue to an already infamous chapter in wrestling history. Hart's time as a manager in professional wrestling wasn't without its share of controversy. Known for managing some of the most notorious heel wrestlers, the bad guys of the wrestling world, Hart fully embraced his role as the loud, over-the-top instigator. He was a master of trash-talking and underhanded tactics, often getting involved in matches to give his wrestlers the upper hand. Whether it was distracting the referee, slipping a foreign object into the ring, or just running his mouth to get under the audience's skin, Hart knew how to play the part to perfection. But while this kind of behavior is part of the show in wrestling, not everyone saw it that way. Some fans felt that Hart occasionally crossed the line, with his words or actions coming across as offensive or insensitive. Of course, in the world of professional wrestling, controversy often comes with the territory. Hart's antics were designed to draw heat from the crowd, and they succeeded, but sometimes maybe a little too well. One of the most talked about chapters of his managerial career came when he worked with comedian Andy Kaufman during Kaufman's unforgettable dive into the wrestling world. Kaufman wasn't a wrestler, but he made a name for himself by challenging women to matches and crowning himself the self-proclaimed intergender champion. This stunt didn't sit well with everyone, with many critics accusing Kaufman of exploiting women and disrespecting the sport of wrestling. Even though it was all part of a work storyline, a scripted angle designed to get people talking, the controversy was very real, And Hart, as Kaufman's manager, found himself right in the middle of it. Hart's association with Kaufman's antics added another layer of complexity to his career. While some fans appreciated the entertainment value and saw it as brilliant heel work, others were put off by the perceived disrespect toward women's wrestling. Whether he agreed with Kaufman's methods or not, the controversy surrounding those matches inevitably brushed off on Hart, adding to his reputation as one of wrestling's most polarizing managers. Looking back on Hart's career, it's clear he had quite the ride, full of highs and lows. Born in Jackson, Mississippi, Hart's journey into the wrestling world started thanks to a chance connection with Jerry the King Lawler. The two actually went to Memphis Treadwell High School together, which is how Lawler knew of Hart. At first, Hart was asked to sing backup for Lawler, but soon enough, he found himself in the wrestling business, stepping into the role of Lawler's manager. Things didn't stay friendly for long, though. After parting ways with Lawler, Hart formed his own crew to take him on, a group called the First Family of Wrestling. And let's just say, it wasn't short on star power. Hart brought together an impressive lineup that included big names like Hulk Hogan, King Kong Bundy, Ravishing Rick Rude, Leaping Lanny Poffo, Jim the Anvil, Neidhart, Kamala, Ox Baker, Macho Man, Randy Savage, Hot Stuff, Eddie Gilbert, the Iron Sheik, and Kevin Sullivan. Talk about a stacked roster of villains ready to go after Lawler. In 1982, Hart's career hit the national stage thanks to his work with comedian and TV star Andy Kaufman. If you've heard of the legendary feud between Kaufman and Lawler, you know it was pure entertainment gold. Hart, Lawler, and Kaufman kept the drama going for over a year, keeping fans hooked the whole time. Around this same period, Hart picked up the nickname The Wimp, a playful jab from Lawler that fans quickly turned into a chant. Lawler even took it a step further by creating a parody song called Wimpbusters, set to the tune of Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters. It came with a music video featuring wrestlers like Randy Savage, Jimmy Valiant, and Dutch Mantell, along with clips of Lawler taking down Hart and his crew. Between 1981 and 1984, Hart wasn't just stirring up trouble, he was leading talents like Austin Idol, Masao Ito, and Eddie Gilbert to championship victories in the NWA international scene. In 1985, his friend Hillbilly Jim recommended him to Vince McMahon, and Hart was quickly brought on board. Nicknamed the Mouth of the South for his nonstop chatter and signature megaphone, Hart became one of the most iconic managers in wrestling history. That megaphone wasn't just for show, it was his weapon of choice. Whether he was riling up the crowd, shouting instructions to his wrestlers, or distracting opponents and announcers. Hart's first big signing was Greg the Hammer Valentine, who was the Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion at the time. Hart managed Valentine at the very first WrestleMania, though things didn't exactly go as planned when Valentine eventually lost his title to Tito Santana. Hart briefly worked with Valentine and Brutus Beefcake as part of the Dream Team before stepping aside for another manager. 1985 was also the year Hart made a career-defining move by pairing Jim the Anvil Neidhart with the young Bret Hitman Hart to form the Hart Foundation. Under Hart's guidance, the duo became one of wrestling's most celebrated tag teams, capturing the WWF World Tag Team titles in 1987. That same year, Hart expanded his empire, managing wrestlers like Danny Davis and the Glamour Girls, who dominated the women's tag division. His success even earned him the prestigious Pro Wrestling Illustrated Manager of the Year award. Hart didn't stop there. He took the Funk family, Terry, Hoss, and Jimmy Jack Funk, under his wing and even stepped into the ring with them during house shows. In a memorable moment in 1986, Hart shocked everyone by winning a $50,000 Battle Royal at Madison Square Garden. Around this time, he also became the manager of the Honky Tonk Man, who famously turned heel and under Hart's guidance became the longest-reigning Intercontinental Champion in WWF history. At WrestleMania III, Hart had a wild night managing multiple wrestlers, from Adrian Adonis to the Hart Foundation, and even Honky Tonk Man in his match against Jake the Snake Roberts. The show ended with Hart on the receiving end of some hilarious punishment from Roberts and Alice Cooper, who teamed up to scare him with Roberts' pet snake, Damien. By 1988, things got even more heated when the Hart Foundation turned against Hart, firing him as their manager and becoming fan favorites. Hart didn't take this lightly and teamed up with the fabulous Rougeau brothers to feud with his former team. Hart also played a key role in helping Demolition retain their titles at SummerSlam 1988 by slipping them his megaphone to use as a weapon. In the late 80s and early 90s, Hart's stable continued to grow. He managed stars like Dino Bravo, Earthquake, and the Mountie, creating storylines that had fans glued to their screens. He formed new teams like Rhythm and Blues with Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine, and even led the Nasty Boys to a WWF Tag Team title victory at WrestleMania 7. In 1993, Hart shocked everyone by turning face after years as a villain. The moment came when Money Inc. attacked Brutus the Barber Beefcake, targeting his surgically repaired face. Hart couldn't stand by and actually shielded Beefcake, marking a dramatic change in his character. This led to Hart managing both Beefcake and Hulk Hogan, including a historic moment at WrestleMania 9 when Hogan won the WWF World Heavyweight title from Yokozuna in an impromptu match. By mid-1993, Hart's time in the WWF came to an end, as he departed alongside Hogan and Beefcake. His departure marked the end of an era, but his legacy as one of wrestling's greatest managers was firmly cemented. After leaving WWF, Hart and Hulk Hogan didn't waste any time staying busy. The duo briefly toured Mexico before heading back to the States. Once home, Hart shifted gears a bit, writing music and even making guest appearances on Hogan's TV show, Thunder in Paradise. But it wasn't long before they reunited in the wrestling ring, this time in World Championship Wrestling. Hart's WCW journey started with a bang. At Bash at the Beach in 1994, he managed Hogan to his first WCW World Heavyweight title, defeating none other than the Nature Boy Ric Flair. It was a monumental moment, and Hart was right there in Hogan's corner, celebrating the victory. But things took a wild turn in 1995. At Halloween Havoc, Hart shocked the wrestling world by betraying Hogan and siding with the Giant. This move aligned him with the Dungeon of Doom, an evil faction led by Kevin Sullivan. Hart embraced his new role, even managing Ric Flair to a world title victory over Macho Man Randy Savage at Starrcade 95. After the Dungeon of Doom fizzled out in 1997, Hart disappeared from TV for a while. When he returned later that year, he focused on managing the Faces of Fear. Then in 1998, he decided to revive his iconic stable, the First Family. While the new version didn't have the same impact as the original, it showed Hart's passion for building and managing talent. Hart's WCW run wasn't just about managing, he occasionally stepped into the ring too. On April 18, 1999, he wrestled and defeated Bubba the Love Sponge by disqualification at a house show. Later that year, he had a hardcore match against Norman Smiley on WCW Monday Nitro. Hart even got into a feud with radio personality Mancow, facing him at Spring Stampede 2000 and again later at Mayhem. Though these matches were more comedic than competitive, they were classic Jimmy Hart, entertaining, over the top, and always memorable. By February 2001, Hart had shifted behind the scenes, joining WCW's booking committee. It was clear that Hart wasn't just a loudmouth manager, he was a creative force in wrestling, both on and off the screen. After WCW was sold to WWF, Hart wasn't ready to let wrestling fade into the background. Teaming up with a group of wrestlers and investors, he launched the Excitement Wrestling Federation, aiming to bring back the family-friendly vibe of early 90s, wrestling with less drama and more action in the ring. Hart also reignited his rivalry with Jerry Lawler by getting involved in Memphis wrestling. From 2003 to 2005, Hart even wrestled there, including a wild loser eats dog food match against Jimmy Valiant in 2003. Classic Jimmy Hart chaos. In 2007, Hart showed up at the PMG Clash of Legends and kept busy with appearances, like Jerry Lawler's 35th anniversary event in 2008. That same year, he dabbled as a commentator for Florida Championship Wrestling and was part of WrestleMania Axis leading up to WrestleMania 25. In 2006, Hart worked with students at Dory Funk Jr.'s Funking Conservatory, filming promos, including one hyping his switch to TNA Wrestling and his involvement with Wrestlicious. Speaking of Wrestlicious, in 2010, Hart announced the launch of his all-female wrestling promotion, which premiered on MAV TV and Byte TV. Hart kept active in the ring too, appearing in battle royals with Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and at PWS Wrestle Reunion. Hart also had a stint with TNA Wrestling, managing the Naturals in 2005 and helping them retain titles at Slammiversary. Later in 2010, he returned as a heel, helping the Nasty Boys in a feud with Team 3D. Although the partnership didn't last long, Hart stuck around briefly before rejoining WWE in 2011 for WrestleMania projects. He popped up at events like SummerSlam and SmackDown, blast from the past, managing teams and delivering his trademark energy. Outside wrestling, Hart became a tiki bar mogul. In 2014, he co-owned Hogan's Beach in Tampa, Florida, and later opened Jimmy Hart's Hall of Fame bar and tiki deck in Daytona Beach, showcasing autographs, memorabilia, and even a championship belt. Meanwhile, he appeared on WWE's Legends House reality show and made memorable appearances like Hulk Hogan's birthday celebration on Raw in 2014 and Raw Legends Night in 2021. Most recently, in January 2023, Hart joined Hogan once again to open WWE's Raw's XXX, proving that even after decades in the business, the mouth of the South still knows how to steal the show. That wraps up today's video. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our channel for more exciting content coming your way.